Our first speaker today is Paul Pickett, who is an environmental engineer, teaches a graduate course in climate change at Evergreen State College. Paul, thank you for being here. Here's the microphone.
Thank you. And welcome everyone. It's really great to see you all here this afternoon. So we're here to talk about oil, and I'm sure this subject matters to you, or you wouldn't be here. But what's really important is why it matters. So I'm going to take a few minutes here at the beginning of the program to try and connect the dots. So let's start with our climate. So how many here think climate is changing? Oh wow, okay, so I'd say, well, how many people here think the Earth is getting warmer? It's kind of the same question. But, so I think most of you do, or some of you don't like raising your hand. But you may know someone who doesn't believe the climate is changing. But it is, and we know that because you can measure it. Scientists have analyzed atmospheric temperatures with thermometers, satellites, and other ways of measuring, and they know, and they can show the Earth is getting warmer. This is a scientific consensus. A few years ago, there was one climate scientist, or one skeptic, who just didn't believe the numbers and thought they were cooking them and said, okay, I'm going to go find a bunch of my colleagues, we're going to recalculate the numbers, do it a whole different way, and just debunk this whole thing. And he spent quite a while doing that, and when he was done, he said, I got the same answer. Because it's true, and he was totally converted, and now he's a believer. But if you find someone who doesn't trust scientists, tell them to see for themselves. They can check out what's happening toward glaciers. They can watch the movie Chasing Ice. How many people have seen that movie? That's a fantastic movie. Hopefully it'll be out on DVD soon, I think. You can Google glacial recession. There are pictures of glaciers receding. You can, there's satellite photos that show how we're seeing the smallest Arctic ice sheet in recorded history. Go to the Audubon website and read about their analysis of bird species counts. Those bird species have moved several hundred miles north, living farther north, and so on and so on. The evidence is there everywhere for people to see. Earlier springs are real blooming. Lots of things are happening. So let's connect the dot. If you think the climate is changing, do you think people are causing it? Yeah? Most people do. That's why you came today. Well, there are some people out there who think climate change is natural. I saw, like, on Earth Day, some right-wing put out this book and started this big campaign to try and push a so-called scientist who was saying, oh, it's all just natural. Well, the fact is that global CO2 is changing at an unprecedented rate. I think many of you, or all of you, know that this month global CO2 levels measured on the top of Mauna Loa were recorded as passing 400 parts per million. This is the highest CO2 levels that have been seen in over a million years, over several million years. This increase has all happened in the last 100 years. I mean, a lot of you may be familiar with the hockey stick graph, where things are kind of going up and down, up and down, up and down, and then the last 50 years is taking off. Scientists know where this CO2 is coming from. They can measure it. They can model it. It's coming mostly from human burning of fossil fuels. They have models that can predict the levels we see now. They can go back in time and run a model and predict what's happening right now. Then they can take that model and predict the temperatures in the future. Then taking that model, they can take out all the human CO2. If it weren't for the CO2 we're putting in the atmosphere, the Earth would actually be getting colder. So there's just, I mean, there's part of the challenge is that they say like half the people don't think people are causing climate change. Well, there was a poll a few years ago of climate scientists. 97% of climate scientists are certain that humanity is changing the climate with carbon emissions. And I just saw, just this week, a study came out. They looked at 20 years of peer-reviewed papers, counted all the times they referred to climate change, and they found 97% of the papers assumed that climate change was real and was happening. I think in the last year, they said there were 521 papers assuming that, or expressing the belief that people were changing the climate. There were 9 that thought there weren't. That's actually like 98.5%. So this is a scientific consensus. There is no serious debate in the scientific community about this. So let's connect another dot. The Earth is getting warmer, and people are causing it by burning coal, oil, and gas. So why does that matter? Warm is nice, right? Some people say, oh, global warming, it'll be nice, you go to the beach. Unfortunately, we're already seeing how this hurts people and our planet. Some areas like Texas or Northeast Africa are seeing severe droughts. Other areas are seeing record storms like Superstorm Sandy. We're seeing heat waves, mountain snowpack disappearing, species extinction. At the same time, we're seeing the oceans get more acidic from the CO2 the oceans have absorbed. And this is just the beginning. Scientists say we can expect more heat, more drought, more and larger storms, loss of water supplies, more species extinction, collapses of food chains. And this can mean for people on this planet more disease, crop failures, economic downturn, social disruption, and war. We're nearing a tipping point, if we haven't passed it already. We are entering the age of climate insecurity. So another dot to connect. Our atmosphere takes decades to adjust to increasing CO2. The temperature increases and changes in climate we are seeing now were caused by the last 50 years of carbon dioxide emissions. The CO2 we're emitting today will change the climate for another 50 years. So what we are doing will affect all of us through the rest of our lives and the lives of our children and our grandchildren. So one final thought. When we build a fossil fuel infrastructure, we are committing to discharge carbon dioxide for another 50 years. When you build a power plant, it's not for 5 years. You're building power plants to run for 50 years, more or less. So the fossil fuel burning plant we build today will change the climate for another 100 years. The coal and oil trains, crude oil, and natural gas pipelines we build now will serve those plants and contribute to changing the climate for the next century. So we need to leave the coal and oil in the ground. We need to create a clean energy economy. Here in Washington, we can show the rest of our nation how to do this. And the U.S. can set an example for the rest of the world. But first, we have to turn this around. So here's what's at stake. Do we want our children and our grandchildren to say to us, why did you let this happen? Or do we want them to say to us, thank you for fighting to stop this pollution. Thank you for helping to save the planet for us. It's important we know why this matters. We need to teach people who don't understand. We need to take action and encourage our friends, family, and colleagues to join us in taking action. There are powerful corporations and wealthy people who are going to spend a lot of money to stop us. But we, and when I say we, I mean you, me, the people of this world, the 99%, we need to take action to stop the oil industry and stop carbon pollution. We need to invent a new economy that brings us prosperity with renewable energy. So who's going to stop the XL pipeline? We will. Who's going to stop the fracking? We will. You can all chant with me if you want. Who's going to stop the tar sands? We will. Who's going to stop the shale oil? We will. Who's going to stop the oil trains and the coal trains? We will. Who's going to build a new economy on sustainable renewable energy? We will. That's right. All right. There's no despair. It's only hope. And we're going to move forward. So I want to end with a quote from Bill McKibben at 350.org. I just read this in an email. I assume he wrote it. And he's a very eloquent person, so I don't doubt it. For the last 2 years, all across the country, people have said the same thing to us. We're ready to fight. And as the planet lurches past 400 parts per million concentrations of CO2, the moment has come. The moment to ask you to do hard, important, and powerful things. We need some of you to risk going to jail, and all of you to show up and speak out. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And there are definitely going to be those opportunities for people to go to jail in the coming days. So we welcome those and look forward to hearing more about those opportunities. And going to jail isn't all that bad if you have friends on the outside who are supporting you, and if you're going to jail for a good reason, like defending against the fossil fuel monsters. So, or the people who abuse this precious resource. I didn't introduce myself earlier. My name is Robert Whitlock. I also go by Bird Whitlock sometimes, so there's no confusion there. And again, it's nice to be here with all of you. So our next speaker is Zoltan Grossman, who's a professor of geography and Indian studies at Evergreen State College. And Zoltan has been working very hard on this issue. So thank you, Zoltan, for being here. And here is the microphone.
Paul gave the overview, the global overview of how climate change is affecting everyone. I want to get to North America and the big picture of the fossil fuel industry in North America before we get to the local level of what's happening in Grays Harbor and how we can really make an impact. And the good news is that the fossil fuel industry is vulnerable. They know they're vulnerable, and that's why they spend so many billions of dollars on PR, on buying off politicians, on trying to influence public opinion, because they know that there is a good possibility that their very thin shipping lines are vulnerable to social activism, like Bert was talking about. And we're not going to talk about the old oil industry that we've had for many, many decades in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, or even the medium 1970s industry that started in Alaska, but the three new fossil fuel basins in the middle of North America are the Alberta tar sands, the Bakken oil shale basin in North Dakota that we're going to be talking about, and we're not going to be talking about the one that everyone else in Washington is talking about, the Powder River Basin in Montana and Wyoming, which is coal, and that's the issue of the coal trains. There's a lot of public attention on that. A lot of awareness in places like Seattle, Bellingham, Olympia, but there's almost zero awareness of the oil trains. There haven't been major articles in the Seattle paper and the Olympia paper, and that's part of our job, is to let people know about how we fit in. And every step of the way, they have to ship in this huge gargantuan equipment. This is a car here, and this is one of the drilling machines that they're trying to do in a heavy haul up to the tar sands. And then they have to bring in supplies, like the fracking supplies, to the Port of Olympia, and then they have to get the fossil fuels, once they're extracted, out to the coast, out to the ports, to get them to the global market, in particular the growing markets in Asia. And so they have to use trains, they have to use barges, they have to use pipelines. And so this is what makes them vulnerable, is the stuff that they want to extract is in the middle of the continent. They know it's very expensive and very politically troubling to get it to the coast. That's where we come in. So for many years we've seen in Oklahoma and Alaska resistance to, especially led by indigenous people, to oil extraction. We've seen the disasters like the Exxon Valdez spill in Alaska, the BP spill. This is actually, there's a website where you can superimpose the size of the BP spill off of Louisiana on a map of your area. So if it started in Olympia, this is how big it would have been. Just to give you a sense of how tremendous these disasters are. And I'm going to give you the quick and dirty version. It's always a dirty version, but I'm going to give you the quick and dirty version this time of the oil industry. We've seen a lot of resistance in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge up in Alaska, but the real push right now is in the Alberta tar sands, which is way up in northern Alberta, in what has been a pristine area, inhabited mainly by Cree and Métis people. There really aren't rail lines per se up there. They're having to get the oil out through pipelines. This is the largest development project on the continent, one of the largest in the world. And the air in that area is now almost as bad as Beijing because of the massive industrial development. Canada is really a climate criminal nation. And we see a lot of opposition from environmental groups, from indigenous organizations working together. And we see this different series of pipelines We've heard a lot about the Keystone XL pipeline. Obama has already approved the southern extension, is, I think, probably about to approve the northern extension, let's hope not. And there are also a series of Enbridge pipelines through the Great Lakes region. They want to build one out actually to Maine. But the real movement, oddly, we don't hear as much about, even though we're right next door to it, is in British Columbia. And that's where there's a lot of resistance by First Nations, by environmentalists, against the Enbridge Northern Gateway proposed pipeline to Kitimat, the Trans Mountain pipeline to Kitimat on the coast, and the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which is the one existing pipeline they now have to the Pacific coast out of the Alberta tar sands, and that ends in Burnaby, BC, and our refinery up in Anacortes is based on that Alberta tar sands oil. They want to double that up now. That was a big issue just recently, this last week in the BC provincial election. And so there's a lot of activism, a lot of blockades, a lot of things going on in BC that we here can support. When it comes to the Keystone XL, this is the Pine Ridge Reservation, a lot of native peoples opposed to a lot of farmers and ranchers, really interesting alliances. By the way, this is the recent 7.7 earthquake at Haida Gwaii, right near the terminus for the proposed northern pipeline. Not a really good place to put an oil pipeline, if you ask me. There's been some others recently.
And that was Alaska? Where was that?
That was Haida Gwaii, which is the islands right off the coast, part of BC. It used to be called the Queen Charlotte's, it's now called Haida Gwaii.
When was the earthquake? Oh.
December?
Of this past?
I think around December.
A few months
Yeah.
ago, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been a couple of them actually recently, not as large as that one. And this is the kind of thing that's happened along the Kinder Morgan pipeline, already in BC. That gives you an idea of a pipeline burst. This is the response of First Nations. That kind of thing, little artistic commentary there. And what's really affecting our area is the through the Salish Sea, the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Strait of Georgia, a massive increase in oil tanker traffic. My wife Debbie and I were up in Squim not that long ago, and it wasn't pretty much every hour you'd see an oil tanker going to and fro. Because of that one pipeline, then they want to increase the number of pipeline terminuses. So the possibility of this salmon region being affected by an oil spill, we'll hear about previous oil spills, is really too much for commercial fishing industry, the First Nations, environmental groups.
Where are they taking the oil?
Well, they're taking, if it's crude oil, they're taking it to be refined. They're largely exporting this oil to Asia as well. I use this for my geography classes, because this is a perfect example. This is how the pipeline company, the Enbridge Pipeline Company, had a TV ad in which they said, hey, this is going to be cool, it's going to be no problem, we're going to take the oil to the end of this pipeline, and our tankers are going to go through this Douglas Channel area. It's really easy to get through, no problem. This is actually what it looks like. They literally erase the islands. And this is a classic case of a map that lies. Because they really have to go through those very narrow channels with these very large oil tankers that could easily run aground on any of these bends. And so environmental groups have been putting out the more accurate map as counter to that. So this whole network of pipelines is one of the issues that I think has really been at the forefront. So it's good understanding of coal trains, good understanding of oil pipelines, not as much a good, this is actually the Evergreen graduation, this is Native Students Alliance, so I have a little demonstration against the pipelines, so that's cool. There have been a lot of blockades, especially down in Texas recently, that have been pretty dramatic, that have called attention to the pipelines. What hasn't received as much attention is this idea of the heavy haul, which I actually learned from Debbie, that went through the proposed route of this mining equipment going from the ports to the Alberta tar sands. It's absolutely necessary to do that. They don't have the rail in order to do it. They wanted to go to Lewiston, Idaho, go up these really windy roads through the Yolo Pass, up through Montana and Alberta. And the Nez Perce tribe and a lot of environmentalists in Idaho opposed this, defeated it. Now the route is actually coming through our area, proposed route for these massive equipment. You might see them on the highway, going through Vancouver and Pasco up the I-90 system. Particularly Spokane seems to be the epicenter of a lot of the movement of this stuff.
So what were those machines for?
For drilling, like this would be drilling equipment, scouring out particular areas. These are monstrous, huge machines that are not what you think of as normal mining equipment in a place like West Virginia. This is massive, this half of this building size of one mining equipment. They have to get it there somehow. So, yeah.
There was a debate last year about shipping something that through Missoula. I talked to somebody over there, and they said it didn't happen, but did it go or not go?
I don't know, but I did hear that there was opposition in Missoula in particular to this heavy haul. Yeah.
The reason they're coming through Washington is because the state allowed it.
Yeah.
The state gave them the go-ahead to come through. Whereas
Okay.
Idaho, they did, what?
Was Governor Inslee there?
No, it was Gregoire.
That's great work. Yeah, and because we have the I system, and when you go through Lewiston, it's more on US highways than are narrower highways. And they basically have to shut down traffic and shut down the tourist
For
industry in order to get this stuff through.
What did they do to the road? That was all very heavy.
Yeah, and the infrastructure and the road and the oil companies aren't investing in the
Everybody
roads,
else
the
has to
state
go
has
on
to.
scales.
Yeah, exactly. So they make a lot of exceptions for the oil industry in general. So that's where we fit in the Port of Olympia, is we're part of a heavy haul. And we're part of a heavy haul of fracking supplies that are going to the Bakken Oil Shale Formation in North Dakota, Montana, Saskatchewan. And Debbie and I found out first about this issue from a friend who's in the Indigenous Environmental Network, Candy Mawson, who's from the Fort Berthold Reservation of re-affiliated tribes that had been facing oil and coal development for a long time. And she actually and a lot of her friends have developed cancer because of all the fossil fuel development around her reservation. So we were tipped off by this article in the Olympian back in October that they were bringing through these proppants, or kind of a sand, alumina, bauxite kind of mixture that actually props up the earth underground during the fracking process. And fracking is hydraulic fracturing, or digging a very deep well. In this part of North Dakota, there were previous oil booms that dug down pretty deep, but not this deep. And then they go horizontal, and they inject water and chemical fluids in almost an explosive way in order to crack the shale to get at oil and gas, and in particular oil. They don't care about the gas as much in North Dakota, they just flare it off. And then extract that and then ship it mainly via truck to places where it's gathered for rail shipping. And of course, if you've seen the movie Gasland, there's a lot of questions about the chemicals that are used in fracking, where to dump those chemicals, the huge amount of water it takes to pump down into the fracking, the release of natural gas through that process that goes in people's faucets and hoses, causing them to explode. Fracking is a huge issue, even if it's only connected to natural gas. And in this case, it's mainly connected to oil. And so we both have the question of climate change because of the oil and because of the release of methanes. Not so much carbon dioxide, but methane. So we all know our geography. We all know there are no major cities between Seattle and Minneapolis, right? Right? Everyone knows that. Maybe Boise, in the northern states. But what's circled there looks like a major metropolitan area. In fact, that's the Bakken Oil Shale Formation in North Dakota, with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gas flares going 24 hours a day. So that's visible from outer space. North Dakota is now the #2 oil producer in the country after Texas. It's displaced Alaska, it's displaced Oklahoma. And that's just been the last 4 years that North Dakota has had this major boom.
Didn't the federal government, the EPA, say to the people who were flaring off that they had to have a limit of flares federally, EPA?
Yeah, So, for instance, the fracking industry is exempt from the Safe Drinking Water Act. They don't have to abide by any of those rules. They don't have to even capture the natural gas for their own profit. It's not really an issue. Yeah.
What would it take to reverse that exemption? Would that take an act of Congress, the
Yeah.
administration do it, or what? How?
Both could do it. But just yesterday, there was an article in the New York Times that the Interior Department is refusing to reveal to the public what the fracking fluid chemical composition is. They still are allowing the companies to keep that a secret. And so we don't even know what carcinogens people are being exposed
But
to.
if this administration cared to reverse that exemption from the safe.
They could do it tomorrow. Yeah, and Sally Jewell, the Interior Secretary, you know, a lot of people had high hopes for her. I no longer have high hopes for her.
EPA, is she?
No.
She's Interior Department.
Oh,
Repeat the question, please,
Oh,
in the future.
okay, sure. So this is just a map I made to summarize, and I want to not really get into the question of the oil trains, we're going to hear a lot about it, but how the geography of connecting us to the Bakken oil shale formation along a single rail line both gets the fracking supplies, the profits from the Port of Olympia to the Bakken, and then the oil comes back on the trains. And ironically, the profits come from China, and then when the oil is, crude oil shipped in here for refining, a lot of that goes to China. A lot of the coal is going to go to China. So a lot of this has to do with the global market as well. But tribal members have been displaced. There's a lot of social costs, a lot of high taxes. It's hard to find housing. There's high rates of crime. Women feel very, very unsafe because of this huge influx of truck drivers, of oil rig workers, and inevitably there's going to be a bust following the boom. And a lot of economies of resource extraction communities have been destroyed because they put all their eggs into that resource extraction basket. They had to build new schools, build new roads, and then when either the prices drop or the resource runs out, they have to, they're left holding the bag, and they're left holding the bag for the cleanup. Yeah.
Why can't Sally Jewell change the fracking rules if she's interior?
She doesn't want to,
Why?
because the oil and gas industry is extremely rich and extremely powerful, and in particular in the last 4 years, because the idea is this is how we're going to become energy independent, and we no longer, believe it or not, this is what they say, we will no longer have wars in the Middle East because we'll be energy independent. That's one of their arguments. And this is a clean industry because they only focus on the natural gas aspect, which itself isn't clean, and says, well, that's displacing other fossil fuels that cause climate change, because they neglect to mention the aspect of methane, which is a worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So there's a lot of propaganda going out there about both the oil and in particular natural gas industries that the Obama administration has bought into hook, line, and sinker, and is a very aggressive proponent of the oil and gas industry, just as much as the Bush administration was.
How is the methane associated with the natural gas?
That when you burn off, when you have gas flares, there's releases of methane. And releases simply through the penetration into these areas where there's methane, there's releases. So this is what we've been doing at the Port of Olympia over the last couple of months when a ship has come in from Shanghai or Tianjin, China, carrying the proppants. We've had flash mobs. We're getting people involved from all different walks of life to try and educate our community. Before action, you actually need people to be educated, and through action, you can also educate and reach people. But because our port is becoming dependent on this resource extraction, in this period of a boom, if there's a bust going on, we will also be affected by that bust. And so we're putting it's a gamble. We're putting our local economy onto the same track as that boom and bust economy in North Dakota. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about. And we really see ourselves allied with the folks from Grace Harbor who have been They've already stopped at coal terminal, and they're well on their way to stopping at This is the kind of thing, we're gonna get more into this. This is the recent oil spill from a train, from tankers on trains in Minnesota. This is the famous Exxon spill of tar sands oil all the way down in Arkansas. And reporters aren't even allowed into that area. They're arrested if they go into that area to document it. A lot of disasters. I can go on, but I don't want to take away. And things that you wouldn't think about because of the huge amount of truck traffic in North Dakota. It's not safe for kids. It's not safe for wildlife. It's not safe for women. So this idea of the boom somehow being something positive, it really disrupts this farming and ranching economy in that part of North Dakota and really changes it permanently. And of course, this is affecting us. We're in solidarity with people in North Dakota, even though the fracking doesn't affect us directly, because we want to be the first community in the country that does action to stop fracking supplies, even though we're not affected directly by the fracking. But we are affected indirectly. This is the map the city of Olympia puts out of sea level rise with even moderate raise in greenhouse gases. We did a blue line march to try to call attention to that. And we hope that the port goes more towards windmill blades, or windmill turbines and sustainable energy instead of being colluding with the fossil fuel industry. Or they're going to start seeing, as was mentioned earlier, this sort of thing again at their port. So, wanted to, in closing, just as a transition, this is all the facts, and you're going to hear a lot of facts about the oil trains and the oil terminal. But as Paul mentioned earlier, this is really about the future generations. This is really about the youth and the kind of world that we're giving to them. And I wanted to play, for 5 minutes as a transition, a video that was done by a 10-year-old Coast Salish girl in central northern BC, who is kind of giving her take on what the oil tankers and potential oil spills really mean to her. So let me just put that on. Her name is Takaya Blaney. She's actually kind of a superstar now. She's now 12 years old, very active in the Idle No More movement. It's called Shallow Waters.
Ocean, black, not blue. I didn't have to dig down.
That's what it's really about.
Arnold Martin, a retired mechanical engineer, one of the founders of Citizens for a Clean Harbor, and Arthur Grunbaum, involved in environmental activities for many years, also a founding member of Friends of Grays Harbor.
Thank you very much for having us. I'd like to acknowledge someone from Grays Harbor who is in the audience today and who is a real leader for our community. And if Frank Gordon would just kind of stand up and wave at people. Frank Gordon is our county commissioner, and he's very actively involved in the study of and the impacts of crude oil to the area of Grays Harbor and beyond. So one of the things that we want to talk about is topic crude. And we're going to give you a little look at the impacts of crude by rail and other transportation means. So you've already learned we are in trouble with CO2. You've already heard that there's 4,000 or 4,400 is the level. And there, in Grays Harbor, there are 3 crude oil projects proposed. And they will house nearly 100 million gallons of fossil fuel. But that's only at one time. Over 1 year's period, it'll be 2 billion gallons that are imported into, stored at, and exported from the estuary of Grays Harbor. So we all know what fossil fuels are. They're dead organisms, and we're proposing that we should not follow their path. You've all seen the back in oil, the discussion that Zoltan has made, done a really good job. Fracking the Bracken, we've learned all about how we've done that. And you've seen the profits. You actually experienced them in your harbor. So let's talk about the route.
Well, the route from North Dakota enters Washington about Spokane, and it, because the rail cars are 108 tons each, travel along the scenic Columbia Gorge to reach Centralia. That's because there aren't very many ways that you can get into the area at low elevation without going through the Columbia Gorge. And there are going to be so many trains coming that they're gonna probably use both sides of the Columbia Gorge. This slide is taken from RBN Energy, and it shows something that which is not highly known. It shows the five top things are crude by rail terminals that are being built by refineries in the state of Washington. And those refineries together can be about equivalent to just a little bit less than 4 billion gallons of crude oil a year. So if you're building these crude by rail terminals to the refineries, why would you want to build crude by rail terminals in Grays Harbor to put it on ships to take it to the refineries? We can't quite figure that out. And this shows the top part is the 3.9 billion gallons of crude oil that comes to the refineries directly when they are completed. So far, only 2 of them are in operation. I believe it's the Phillips 66 one and the Target Sound one. The rest are just in the planning stages.
And this gallons per year?
These are gallons per year in the right-hand column. Yes.
And Cordes has one too.
Yeah, Cherry Point is up.
Well, I'm sorry. It's the Ferndale, Cherry Point BP is the one that's in I was wrong about the.
Okay, so that's my question too. Is the
Yes.
Cherry Point one built, or is it the same
Yes.
area that they want the full terminal?
No, it's the existing BP terminal, they're just trying to expand it.
That's right. This is in addition to that terminal, yes.
And this is that many gallons per year over a 10-year period or the next 20 years, or are they projecting how long this is going to, hypothetically, I don't know.
We don't know either because you don't know how long they can keep extracting this. Hold on.
I thought it was also weird they weren't shipping it by rail to the refineries directly. Is that because your oil terminals might be actually for export instead of for refining here in the States?
It's certainly possible, but obviously, currently, crude oil produced in the United States has to be shipped to refineries in the United States. There's nothing saying that the executive order couldn't be changed, but at this point, it has to go to refineries in the United States. And will they go north? My guess is they're going to go south to like Richmond, California. Yes, sir.
I know you want to get going, but one question, what about the regulation that oil coming into Puget Sound has to be refined and used in Washington State from about 20 years ago?
I believe that it's hard to imagine that because there's no refineries in Oregon. I think a lot of your oil goes to Oregon also, so I think that's probably sort of out of date.
Okay.
I'm not sure of that, but yes.
I just have a request.
Yes.
Since I'm a little bit of a language cop, I would feel better if instead of using, saying will be, that you put it in the certificate and said would be. I like the idea that we can defeat this.
So do we.
Okay, so just language matters. So if we say it we will have this will happen,
It's
it's discouraging.
It's highly likely that those top 5 crude by rail terminals will be built.
Oh, it is.
They are in the permitting stages. 2 of them are already in existence. And they're going to be built at existing refineries. So I would say that's probably nearly a done deal.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well,
Are they adding, are these numbers the added trains, or do these numbers include the trains that are already there?
These are added trains, some, except for the Cherry Point and the, I believe the Target Sound one. These are what would happen a year if
Okay.
all these refineries.
The Cherry Point,
We're already getting unit oil trains to Cherry Point.
Yes.
okay.
The bottom 3 are the proposed terminals in Grays Harbor. None of those are currently built. You can see that that's 2 billion gallons a year. The others are 4 billion gallons a year. Quite a difference.
So of the first 5, 3 of them are not built yet, but they're in the permitting stages.
I believe that's correct.
But they're
And
all
the
existing.
bottom 3 are just now starting.
The bottom, the Westway has now a substantial shoreline development permit. That is in process. There's also a legal challenge against that. Imperium has an MDNS, Mitigated Determination of Non-Significance. US development project is still in the planning stages. I think they're smart enough to wait to see what happens to the others before they go farther with it.
And the Imperium permit, you said, you're talking about the Washington State Department of Ecology issue then, is that correct?
Washington State Department of Ecology and City of Hoquiam.
They're co-leads.
And is there any discussion about appealing that or,
We are in the process of appealing that. As a matter of fact, we filed an appeal to the Shorelines Hearings Board. It's a coalition of Friends of Grace Harbor, the Grace Harbor Audubon Society, Citizens for a Clean Harbor, the Sierra Club, and Surfrider. So we now, and there's an additional appeal, separate, but an additional appeal from the Quinault Indian Nation. And the nation has been very vociferous in their not wanting to have this be a part of the, what happens in Grace Harbor and on the coast. They feel that it is a violation of treaty rights. Yes.
What about the, city of Hoquiam, and, I mean,
Okay.
how are their governments, how's the?
City of Hoquiam is a co-lead to this. And so what they have done is they've taken on the permitting process. They, along with the Department of Ecology, have determined that so far, Westway and Imperium are both worthy of a mitigated determination of non-significance.
What does that mean?
It means that they think that it's not gonna hurt anything, and if we do some mitigation for that, like, one of the things is that we would have a tug accompany the vessels in and out of the harbor to the 3-mile limit. So what our lawsuit says is that they erred in giving the MDNS and the substantial development permit, that they should not have done this without having done an environmental impact statement, or EIS. Yes.
and is your organization asking for donations for that? Because you might be able to gather some money here in Olympia for that process, I don't know.
Well, we would never turn down funds because, as you well know, legal fights are costly. And we expect this to go on for a long time. And one of the things that we're going to need are experts. So it's not just for legal expenses, it's going to be for experts such as geologists and water quality individual, fishing people that can talk about what crude oil would do to salmon. I mean, I can do a lot of research and I can tell a lot of that, but I'm no expert. I'm no expert on anything.
Am I right, you have about 100 slides left?
I do have, well, there's only 50 of them, but we should move on. Thank you, Sultan.
Well, the only way you can reach Hoquiam and Aberdeen by rail is from Centralia on the Puget Sound and Pacific Railroad. And this shows the route of that. It goes through along the route of the Chehalis River. And the next presentation you will hear details some of the pitfalls in putting oil trains across existing 100-year-old bridges into possibly the river. We don't think it's at all a good idea, and your next presenter even is more profound about it than I am. So it goes through these towns, and those towns we're not gonna bore you with all of them, but the biggest ones that are a problem are Elma and Aberdeen and a little bit of Oakland. Here's Elma. Elma has ever so many rail crossings. How many, Jared? 11 rail crossings. This is a 1.5 mile long crude oil train, and we colored it in brown just because it was kind of a nice color, considering that we put shipping oil through here. This is 11th Street, is that right?
Second Street.
2nd Street, up to 11th Street.
Yes.
And if you live north of this, which north is up on this map, like it's supposed to be, if you have a heart attack, I'm sorry, we can't get to you. If you have a need to go to the corner store for your coffee fix or something, you won't be able to do that for about next 18 minutes, because it takes 18 minutes for a train to go by at 5 miles an hour. And if that's not the problem, there'll be another one soon, so you can be able to have the same problem again later. Yes?
And the fire station, where was that located?
Jared, where's the fire station?
I like fires. So that's 3rd Street,
So.
fire department right
So
So everybody
fire up in
gets-
the hill.
Fire station's there, the hospital is right up here.
there. Hospital's over here.
Yeah.
Is the black line, is that the railroad line?
Yes, it is.
Oh.
The railroad line goes here. If you want to get up to Bangor, you turn right. You want to go to Oakland, you turn left. Okay, Artie. These are all the rail crossings in the Aberdeen-Hoquiam area with these circles here. These circles are, there's ever so many of them. The green flags are schools, elementary and high schools, or daycare centers. The red crosses there are the hospitals.
Oh.
And for the most part, the biggest effect is right up here in the Gateway Mall. If you've ever been to Aberdeen, you might have tried to go to Walmart. Well, there's Walmart right there. We don't think you should go there, but should you go there, you could be blocked in for quite some time. This is the length of a 1.5 mile train, starting at the Rotary Log Pavilion, and it ends clear down here. Next slide, please.
That means we'll get an ally.
And it continues on. This is another 1.5 miles along the same route. This is continuing on. We're into Hoquiam now, and this starting from this is the Hoquiam River, and this is clear up to the Great Harbor National Wildlife Refuge, which is just off the map.
Where's the port? Could you go back for a minute?
Yes.
Where's the port?
The port is
Bottom
right in
Oh,
Right in here.
See the log there.
This,
Thanks.
this is Terminal 1 right here.
Right,
So
that's
what,
true.
would they go past that? Isn't that where they're headed?
Hoquiam, the U.S. Development Project is past that.
Okay,
The Imperium is right here with those tanks. This is Westway. Westway is looking at building here. Imperium is looking at building here right next to Fry Creek, which is of course a salmon-bearing stream.
Would the train stop and then there would be something to get it off?
What they're going to do is they're going to build tracks. They have existing tracks here and over here, and they're going to expand those, add more emptying tracks up there. So there's going to be tracks, emptying tracks. There's going to be toing and froing, basically, for they break up these unit trains into strings so they can bring them into the unloading area.
well, that's I guess, if we go back for another minute.
Yep.
So where are the tracks that come from where you've got the train marked on there into the,
Yeah, where does the train come
Just
into
follow
the?
The train comes in this way,
okay.
right through there. This is the route to Hoquiam. This is the route down into the port. And this is, where's Home Depot? There's Home Depot.
Yeah.
You can,
So
there's a possibility you can also block off Home Depot from any access from any direction. If you have trains coming in, if you have one train going this way to Hoquiam you have other ones going back and forth. This way you can block off Home Depot also. So you can not only block off Home Depot, you can also block, and Walmart, so, yes,
As they're unloading at this point right now,
yes. They are unloading.
where do they stage from, is what?
They stage right off of this line right here.
Right. You may get a better feel for that and a picture of that once we get to the proposal itself.
Thank you.
So what happens is we will show you existing and we will show you the proposed and how they've laid that out. And that may give you a clearer
Thank you.
picture.
Okay.
And here is a Panamax-sized ship. These are the largest ships that conveniently can get in and out of Grays Harbor. They are approximately 50,000 to 65,000 deadweight tons capacity, hold about 16 million gallons of oil in addition to the fuel ballast. To get them in out of Grays Harbor under normal tide conditions, it will probably limit them to 50,000 deadweight tons. They're supposed to be double hulled, and we believe, yes, they are going to be double hulled.
So, but one of the things that you may not understand is how big is a Panamax? You know, so let's try and give a feel for what that is. And this is how big a Panamax is. Are you all familiar with the Satsop towers? The Satsop tower is 480 feet tall. If you'll see, as you can see, the Panamax, as we call it, stands taller than that. And this little illustration is thanks to the gentleman right here, Jared Bigler Barnes, who is a star in our... So the other way of doing things is to take it by articulated tug and barge. They're only 480 feet. Remember, the tower is 480 feet.
Where do you do the transfer? Right at Terminal 1.
Yep.
Where?
At
Terminal 1.
Terminal 1.
How close is Terminal 1 to the Wildlife Refuge? Terminal 1 is
He's getting
close,
to that.
Terminal 3 is close.
Terminal 3 is right next door. This holds about 6.4 million gallons of oil. So what happens when these vessels come in or go out of the harbor? What are the things that are important that they pass? These are incredibly sensitive areas. As you can see, we have migratory birds and raptors. We have tribal, usual and accustomed fishing areas. All along here, we have commercial, recreational clam digs, adult and juvenile Dungeness crab. We have a variety of fish who grow up in the estuary and transition in the estuary, and that's what supports a very big, large commercial, recreational, and tribal fisheries. Yes?
Also, if you point out, you can see, or point out the channel, the shipping, this is a very shallow estuary, lots of mud flats. And the shipping channel is just that narrow band.
Oh, it's like going up to, not Anaheim. Going through the...
Yeah. So, and it has to be continually dredged because it fills in. So we're not talking about the fact that these ships have all this room to move around. They have only that room.
How wide is it then?
I'm not sure, but it's not very wide at all.
Approximately 600 feet, I think.
Yeah.
How wide is one of those Panamax things?
About 105 feet.
ship is 100 feet, over 100 feet.
Now, they have to wait for the tide.
Oh, I know, right, right.
But
It's only
if
dredged
there's
to minus
any
36 feet.
miscalculation, off
Right.
they go into the mudflats and then they start to sink.
Yeah. No, I mean,
The ship could turn sideways and be sticking in the mud flats.
yeah.
That's correct, and then it would
Yeah.
immediately start to work its way in.
Okay, you already ship other things out from the
Yes.
port, probably logs and a few other things. How big are those ships? How many ships do you get shipped out? And how would this impact what you already have going on?
Latest slide.
I believe that's a later slide that we can show you that will do that. We'll just try and give a little bit of a thread of what we're trying to build our case, as it were. So, all of this is to say what happens when a spill happens. This is the mess that happens. And monthly, somewhere along the coast, a large ship runs into trouble. And the Coast Guard has responded to tens of thousands of oil spills. That's what we're told. So here's an example of how a spill could happen. This is pretty frequent within the Grays Harbor area that we know of. And that's where you have pooling of the rainwater, which washes out the ballast, which then causes a failure. And you can see that on Mulford Road, which is elsewhere than here, but there was a washout area, and exactly what could happen in Olympia, anywhere in western Washington, and certainly in Grays Harbor, happened here. Here's another example, and it's not that we have not had spills.
That's not a significant impact, though.
No, that's
mitigated significantly.
That's something you can mitigate. Absolutely, you can mitigate for that.
And it's New Jersey, who cares, right? I do.
So what we're going to do here is this is a program produced by NOAA, and they have an oil spill program. In this particular thing, there's nothing in Grays Harbor that is called a location file, which would give you the winds and to give you the currents, give you the tides, in which you can fiddle with this. But you can go online if you want and take a look for a program called GNOME, G-N-O-M-E, and on their NOAA site, and you can play with something that they have for the Columbia River and something that they have for the Straits of Juan de Fuca, I believe. So what we did is took this upon ourselves to take just a single day, which was kind of usual weather in Grays Harbor. This was January 23rd. It was a windstorm that ranged between 3 to 25 knots, and a knot is 1.15 miles per hour. So if you want to do the math and convert. But here's one that happens at Terminal 3. Terminal 3 is right next to the wildlife refuge. So what you're seeing here, remember, is the wind only. Imagine, if you will, if you added the tidal influence and the amazing flow of the Chehalis River to this picture that you're having and seeing.
What's the period of time?
This is a 5-day period. So we're taking the winds and we're stretching it out over a 5-day period so that you can see the initial spill, you can see the deposition of it, and how it goes onto the north side, and how it goes to the south shore, and then how it moves. And then we took one and we did that at the center, kind of leaving as if it were in the shipping channel, and the same storm, and where would those oils go? And hopefully this will start.
So is the red the oil?
The red and the black are oil. They're two different thoughts. The red oil is 90% chance that's where it will go, and the black ones are 100% chance of this is where it will end up.
Oh.
And as you can see, this is, just kind of fills Bowerman Basin and the Wildlife Refuge and deposits itself on the south shore of Grays Harbor as well. Again, let me say, wind only, not the river, not the tides. Well, this one was a equivalent of a back in the oil, our testing that we did. So you can choose the kind of oil once you use this program. And so we did the most likely oil that would come down. If we were talking about a tar sands, it would be quite a bit different. Yeah, because that's just sinks. And our final one here is leaving the harbor just around the jetty and what would happen. And as you can see, it's migrating north along the coast. Goodbye to the razor clams, goodbye to the Quinault industry. And likewise, as you go into Westport and around in here, Elk River, Johns River, and the whole fishing industry is pretty much toast.
Goodbye, oysters, huh?
Yep, and goodbye, for sure. So, we did a little quick math on some vessel loadings and unloading spills between 1970 and 2012. That's mainly because that was available and we don't have anything more current than that.
What area then?
That was the Washington. So, I believe, is that not correct? I don't think it's correct. I think it's entire U.S. Oh, it is U.S.? Okay, sorry about that. So, at any rate, there are 83 spills per year of less than 2,100 gallons.
2,100 gallons is 50 barrels.
And there are at least 9 spills per year of 50 barrels to 50,000 barrels.
But in a spill situation, a barrel spreads out over a huge surface area.
Right.
Yes. So, and as we said before, approximately once a month, a large ship somewhere along the coast runs into trouble. And over the past 20 years, the Coast Guard has responded to tens of thousands of oil spills.
Perhaps you remember the new Carissa grounding off Coos Bay, Oregon. This is the new Carissa. Up in the left corner, you see the front of it. In the right corner, you see the back of it. So the new Carissa broke up a bit, and then it washed ashore and became a real problem, but had 70,000 gallons of crude, fuel, probably bunker sea oil in that case, in the surrounding areas. About 3.5 million oysters were killed by this spill. Clausen Oysters, which is down in the Coos Bay area, was forced to shut down operations. Obviously, they lost 70% of the crop and they almost went into bankruptcy. And then we had another spill in 1988, which is the Nestucco oil spill. This was a barge loaded with 231,000 gallons of bunker sea fuel, which is what the large ships typically burn. The slick dispersed over 800 square miles from Grays Harbor to Vancouver, BC. and more than 13,000 oiled birds were collected by rehabilitation workers, but about, they believe, 4 to 6 times more birds were never found or just sunk or died. So over 56,000 birds were probably killed in this. And we don't know the impacts to fish and other marine organisms.
I have a quick question for you. So, I mean, these happen long ago enough that are there been any studies done of, for example, this is oysters that we're eating here in the Pacific Northwest. Has anybody done any health studies of what the impacts are 20 years later? Or is that a later slide too?
No, it's not.
It's not, but the oysters are tested on a monthly basis. Usually they use a fecal coliform. So fecal coliforms, the maximum that it can be accepted by the Department of Health is 11 colonies per milliliter. So they don't necessarily measure for oil in doing that sort of a thing, but it would certainly be a taste thing, and it would impact from there of whether people enjoyed them as much. So, and we don't have really hard statistics on what they do, but they are tested on a weekly and monthly basis.
At a point about the Nisquika, I was working for a couple of you when that happened. They were being asked to bring them into Grays Harbor, and the agency refused to do that, so they took it down to the Columbia, and instead of oiling Grays Harbor, they oiled the Olympic National Park and all the way, an international incident, because then Canada was saying, why didn't you take it to Grays Harbor? You put oil in Canada. Point being, it's a no-win situation. I mean, if you're in the harbor, there's habitat and wildlife getting screwed, and if you're out of the harbor, there's habitat and wildlife getting screwed. And that was in the storm. It was like the barge was in a storm, and it broke a cable, and it just was, this was an accident, you know, because of the bad weather we had. There's a book in the library to read about it.
So, as we know, when a spill happens, it can affect wildlife. Some of the things that we discovered on there is that even the dispersants are an issue, and they become a bioaccumulated. The birds suffer from hypothermia, predation, sinking, drowning, poisoning, inability to breathe is just plain nasty. And it's something you don't want to have happen.
Well, this is the Pacific Flyway, and this is the migration route that the shorebirds take. Grays Harbor is a home to the Grays Harbor National Wildlife Refuge, which is pretty much...
How about right in here?
Sorry. That's okay, we're all one planet.
Yeah, we're all one planet. And Grays Harbor has been declared a region of hemispheric importance due to its getting at least 500,000 shorebirds annually visits, and over 50% of the migrants of one singular species. And the species that they get more than 50% of happens to be red knots, Pacific red knots. And here's Grays Harbor down here. So this is a refueling stop for the birds. The next one is the mouth of the Fraser River Delta, just a jump for a shorebird. Next one up is the Copper River Delta, and the Yukon Delta is clear up there. So these birds are on their way to the Alaskan breeding grounds. And this is a very important feeding stop for them. The previous best stop, it happens to be San Francisco Bay.
Are they endangered? No.
Some of them are.
Oh,
Are they on the endangered species list? No. I wouldn't go out that door. Go this way. You can get lost.
Yeah, you get locked in.
This is what can happen with an oil spill. This is a massive fish kill in Louisiana caused by the oil degrading and using up the oxygen in the water, killing the fish. Obviously, this salmon had a little problem with oil, big problem. Long-term ecological effects include poisoning the marine substrate, interrupting the food chain, and creating areas of dead zone. This shows you the state of Washington marine resources over the past 10, 11 years. $2.5 billion. This is exclusive of native fisheries. This is commercial fisheries only. It's a lot of money. Dungeness crab, $500 million. Oysters, $382 million. Shrimp, $53 million. Razor clams, $2.2. This does not include people going out and digging clams. That's, heaven knows how much that is. There's not good reporting.
So the other thing that we have is a very important ecosystems, and this one is a glass sponge coral, and there are only 2 known colonies in the world, one of which is off of Grays Harbor. The oil could very easily collapse this sort of a thing, any sort of a spill.
This is a picture of a burning oil tank. We don't know how this tank got started. There are plenty of ways it can get started. We'll mention that in the next slide. When you take crude out of the ground, there's a fair fraction of water in it. They try to get out all the water they can before it ships. But if you let it sit in this tank, the water, being heavier than the oil, sinks to the bottom, at least for the Bakken crude. We won't talk about tar sands crude. It sinks to the bottom anyway. But if you have a fire starting there, the fire on in the oil will heat the water, and it's prevented from getting up to the top. It goes into superheat condition. Anything then can cause it to flash into steam, causing a great impressive flashover with this oil and water and steam mixture coming out. And when crude burns, it emits these chemicals. They're bad stuff. Besides CO2, carbon monoxide, lead, oxides of nitrogen, particulates, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and sulfur dioxide and VOCs. And this is some of the ways fire can start. Probably the most logical one is the operator error and equipment failure. Everybody says there won't be any failures. I would say if are people involved, are pieces of equipment involved, the people can certainly fail, so can the equipment. You know, they haven't told us that. We've asked. The question is, what kind of earthquake standards these have? And these tanks are supposedly built to withstand for the design of the API 650 standards. And I was talking to the project manager for the Westway tanks. I asked him if Appendix E, which is seismic requirements, applies in this Westway project. The project manager doesn't know, but perhaps the design people do, but he doesn't know. So we'll try to find that out in the legal room, courtroom probably. This is a crude oil fire, and you can see you don't want to have crude oil fires, especially, I live about 3 miles or 2 miles from the U.S. development, about 3 miles from the other 2 things. I don't really want to have the wind blowing my way. And what RD's right across the bay, he doesn't want it blowing his way either.
And speaking of earthquake.
Yeah, these are the ground motions, peak accelerations, in percents of acceleration of gravity. So 120% You're in the 80% to 120% of earthquake acceleration of gravity in this area, which means it can just shake the heck out of a tank. The last Cascadia subduction zone earthquake was 1700, January of 1700. That caused a drop of about 2 meters. We can have a similar drop in the next subduction earthquake, potential for magnitude 9 quake. We hope it's a bunch of smaller quakes, but who knows? And here's the most affected counties, the ones on the coast and the ones on the sound. And somehow it doesn't mention Thurston County up there, but I would guess it could come clear down to the end of the sound. But it's not something that you want to fool around with. It's a tsunami. The people in Fukushima know about that. And this is a map of the tsunami inundation zone for Grays Harbor County. And this is where the terminals are. And that's where Terminal 3 is, right there, which is right next to the refuge, which is off to the left. It's the refuge. And this is a ship from Fukushima that was carried inland quite some distance. Now this is the farthest along in the permitting process, the Westway terminals. They currently have four tanks. These tanks hold 13.4 million gallons. They began operations in the harbor in 2008. They primarily import and store methanol, and they have about a dozen terminals across the United States, none of which handle crude oil. So when they say they're experienced a lot of things, but not crude oil. This is the Westway existing terminals, existing tanks. Those tanks are 80 feet in diameter, 50 feet high.
Could you go back for a second?
Yep.
Is that a train? Are those train cars?
Yes, those are train cars.
How long is that train?
Looks like about 15 cars. 15 cars, but they're parallel tracks.
Okay. So it's about less than 20% of the 1.5 mile train that you were talking about?
That's a fair estimate. However, they're going to build an extension of those tracks, and that shows up on the next slide. Poorly, but it shows up on the next slide. They're extending the tracks out so they can put a whole train in there, supposedly. These are the new tanks they're considering building. Those tanks are 150 feet in diameter by 64 feet high. And because they're higher than the current 55-foot limit, they had to get a conditional use permit, which was granted on Thursday. Well, excuse me, it wasn't granted. They had a hearing on it Thursday. On the 28th of this month, they will be coming out with a decision on that, which is likely to be, okay, go ahead. It happens to be, there are some soybean terminals about 200 feet away from it that are much higher than that, so it's unlikely to be overturned. This is the way that on the bottom shows a typical unloading zone for cars. They pop the top, they hook hoses to the bottom and drain them out the bottom.
However, Westway says, we're not going to pop the top. We are going to leave them closed, and we're going to take it from the bottom. So it's going to be gravity, and it's going to go into a big tank, which will be open. And one of the things that nobody seems to quite be concerned about is the air quality from those open tanks of crude oil.
Each of these tanks is closed on the top and have a floating internal roof, so as to minimize the amount of vapors. Yes?
How long have they been working on the EIS?
They haven't.
There's no EIS required.
That's our complaint.
Well, that's what we're appealing.
That's the basis of our appeal, is that there
Okay,
is
all right, all right.
EIS.
There's no EIS, and they're treating these three projects as if they're separate. The others are not mentioned in it.
Minimally mentioned,
Yes,
Westway and Imperium are mentioned together, but they're not really considered as if they were both operational.
Has anybody talked about doing a programmatic EIS or
That's
mass?
what we're asking.
That in the lawsuit, that's what you're
Yes.
asking for?
okay. Imperium site. Imperium is please read this. This is the mission statement for Imperium.
It is not just fuel we're working on.
We founded this company with a goal of fundamentally changing how we power our vehicles by creating a fuel that would reduce global warming and our dependence on the dwindling supply of petroleum, while at the same time providing a renewable source of energy for generations to come.
So wasn't this founded originally by Paul Allen, who started with Microsoft with Bill Gates? Paul Allen paid for Imperium. Is he still associated with this project?
That I can't answer. That's a good question. I don't know.
The actual,
Let's find that out, because he is very susceptible to public pressure.
The information we have is that the Imperium ownership is a guy named John Plaza, who also happens to live in the same city where Paul Allen does, which is not a surprise. It's a big city. Anyway, this is Imperium. These are the existing tanks. They bring various vegetable oils in and convert them into biodiesel.
Also, that's Fry Creek. It's been channelized, but it does have fish
Where does it go? It's just sort of.
up into it goes underneath some roadways and culverts.
Does the fish survive?
Yes, they are. So go ahead, Mark.
This is the full extent of the Imperium project. First, they're talking about building 5 tanks. These tanks are each 80,000 barrel tanks, and then they're talking about building an additional 4 tanks later. We didn't go into these are all surrounded by berms. We didn't go into the surrounding of these other tanks. This containment berms are only required to hold the contents of the largest tank. Westway, the ones farthest off the screen, are building 200,000 barrel tanks, and a containment berm for that would be about 7.5 feet high. The Westway tank, the Imperium tanks, are 80,000 barrel tanks, and presumably the containment berm for that's going to be 3 or 4 feet high.
Excuse me, just a question on them berms, now, how they being built? I can see structured on these tanks with piling and stuff, now these berms, it's just a soil berm, and you have earthquake, the soil underneath is going to liquefy, and the berm's gone.
Yes, according to the Westway SEPA document, they're going to put in a concrete berm. So Westway's going to use a concrete berm according to them. That is not in the language for the Imperium or the U.S. development. Well, U.S. development SEPA document does not exist, but
What about, because if those are earthen berms, oil seeps through earth. And all you need is a little time, you don't even need a huge spill. You just need a little bit of leakage, and look at where the creek is.
yes, those are exactly correct. And the elevation of the ground in this particular place is between 15 and 17 feet above average mean sea level.
So do they think the earth is gonna stop it from going another 15 or 17 feet?
I don't, but they are lying that they're putting in an internal, quote, impervious, unquote, barrier to protect the berm from the oil.
So, and the other thing is, notice here's your train, and here's Fry Creek. 25-foot setback is not appropriate for anything.
Doesn't that violate the, what's the act that covered creeks? Isn't something like a two?
Critical areas ordinance.
Yeah.
So there is a critical area ordinance, but
In certain areas, they have reduced that. And I have not found the setback for Hoquiam, but I'm searching. Because it should be a violation.
Agreed, it should be. So that's what Imperium is planning. Very, very minimalist. They're putting in small tanks so that you don't have to build such a high berm as the Westway. However, then there's the third one. This is Terminal 3. There's Terminal 3. This is a Willis Enterprises wood chipping plant. They take logs, chip them, send them out for pulp. This is the Hoquiam Sewage Lagoon, as it used to look, before they diked it off. And the U.S. development site is up above there, and here we are, Willis Development, Willis Enterprises, U.S. Development, and this green hatched area is the wetlands area which drains across Paulson Road. There's Paulson Road, is vertical, and it drains into the Grays Harbor National Wildlife Refuge.
And there's the high school right there, you can see the track.
That's it, that's Hoquiam High School.
And a skate park as well.
Yes, and a skate park and a few other parks. And this is what they're planning for U.S. development. They're planning on building a tail track, they call it, which is on the old route of the railroad to Moclips, which has been torn out for, I don't know how many years, 20 years, something like that. And they have to reestablish that tail track for somewhere between 2,000 and 7,000 feet out there to give them room to bring the unit trains past the junction to get them into their car storage area. And they're planning on building, right now, 8 100,000 barrel tanks to possibly 10 100,000 barrel tanks. So they'll be storing between 800,000 barrels and 1 million barrels of crude oil on site, which they then pipe down to Terminal 3 for the loading. And please note that Paulson Road will be blocked for a fair share of the time by trains going across it. They're going to have to put in, I don't know, crossing gate or what they put in. But, you know, if you want to go down Paulson Road, you may have to wait for quite some time. Happens to be the current route to the refuge. There's another route, but not likely. Westway CP document says the Port of Grays Harbor can handle 12 ship movements a month at terminals 1, 2, and 4. Westway project has 5, Imperium project has 6. That's 11 per month. This does not include the current 7 ships a month from Acacia, AGP, Decorum, Cosmo Specialties, or existing Westway and Imperium shipments. So it seems to me that 7 plus 11 is more than 12. It doesn't include any ship movements from the proposed tank farm at Terminal 3 or Willis Enterprises. So here we are. This is an addition of 21 new tanks, just like Zoltan had in his slide, with 2.3 million barrels of crude oil, 97.4 million gallons of crude at the edge of the estuary, 2 billion gallons being shipped through the estuary per year. That's 25 additional unit trains per week. That's happens to be 12.5 about in loaded and 12.5 empty per week out. And this is over what is currently a single lane track with 1 side track in it. They're planning, I think, on putting a second side track in. But still, it's a little bit tough to pound a square peg into a round hole, which I think is what they're trying to do. This would be 8 Panamax-sized ships making 16 crossings of the bar. And Westway Terminals would add an additional 5 barges for 10 bar crossings.
When they were talking about the one up in Bellingham, they said that in addition of, I don't remember how many ships per, whatever it was, would equal to a 17% risk of a ship-to-ship accident. Okay, where one ship runs into the other, all right? And what they were proposing at Cherry Point was enough to increase the risk by almost 100%. And so has anybody done that kind of a look at what the, because that was something we got out of, was it the Coast Guard, Larry, or was it the name, I can't remember who it was, with the 17% increase.
So there's a study that's going to be released soon, done by Eric DePlace, who's Sightline, and he's studying the impacts of crude oil, of all of the ships and all of these things throughout the state of Washington. So we'll have a better understanding of what those impacts will be and what sort of a percentage increases, because Eric does a really good job of working with the statistics and working with the information. Yes?
You mentioned longshore jobs. Well, I'm guessing the longshore union likes this. What's the response you're getting from other unions? Are they all supporting this, or are you finding any kind of split, or some unions on your side?
Most of them are silent. And the longshoremen have come to our presentations, and they say, well, we really want the jobs. And then they take you by the side, to the side, and they say, we expect you to do the work to make sure that this works, because we want our jobs, and we want those jobs, but we don't want to hurt the estuary or the region. So they're cognizant that there's some downsides to it, and they're depending on us to make the argument. And we wonder why it is that the lead agencies are not making that argument, but they aren't.
So RD, I know that you basically, Aberdeen stopped coal trains. Why can't you stop this? Obviously, public health and safety is a huge issue. It's very problematic for the public health and safety of Aberdeen. I would think it would be a no-brainer to stop this, but obviously you cannot do this.
Well, you can only do it, there's 2 ways to do it, or how we interpret the way to do it. One, we have to build our grassroots, and we have to build our organizations, and the organizations have to be many, and they have to come from all prongs, all walks of life. They can't just be those of us who worry about the birds or the fish. It has to be those people that worry about their own industry and what's going to happen to all the train traffic that's going to come in here. What would happen to the resort hotel who loses its attractiveness because the waterways are now polluted. So that's one way of doing it. The other way, of course, is the legal. It's a more expensive way of doing it. It's a tough battle, but you have to do it, because if you don't challenge the various permits, then they go through. And it's only if you challenge them, and unfortunately they have to challenge them through the legal process, that you can succeed. But it takes both. And the individuals are most important. Look what's happening around, Cherry Point. Millions of comments, and even so, it's going forward.
Yes, sir.
The argument that's made for fossil fuels that it'll help the economy and create jobs, it seems that we should be offering an economic argument, because I think we could have a better argument for solar panels and electric cars and wind and other renewables, you know.
Absolutely.
Do it in economic terms, yeah.
Absolutely, and there's some excellent slides that talk about how many jobs oil provides and how many jobs solar and alternative fuels would provide.
And the home renewables.
You know, one of our big problems on Grays Harbor is that the port and then people using taxpayer dollars are spending lots of money, they're getting the message out. And so we have to fight our own tax dollars down there to fight them. And we gotta get this thing that they got going, that us guys are against jobs. That's on all the time. I hear my other people up at the county, the newspapers aren't representing us fairly. We're doing a horrible job down there. I mean, we're flakes living up there in that mountain, and so we have to really, really fight to make Stephen, the Data World, and the rest of them represent us.
It's true.
I'd like to just add, you said there were two ways to doing it, I'd just like to add a third, and that's standing it up against appointed and elected people that are backing.
True, and to that subject, there's a Port Commission office that has come up. The incumbent is a gentleman by the name of Charles Caldwell, been there for 2 terms, looking to go for a 3rd term. Each of these terms are 6 years. There's only 3 port commissioners, and we finally have a new face, Ron Figler Barnes. You may hear that name again, at least the last name, in our next presenter. His son will be presenting to us. And Ron is working to run against Chuck Caldwell. And so any support that you can give towards him would be helpful. So,
Have you heard from the Chambers of Commerce in Ocean Shores or Westport or any of the resort industry where they stand? I know that Oneida has the resort, or Quinault has the resort, but if there are other resort.
so I work on a Marine Resource Committee called the Grays Harbor County Marine Resource Committee, and I work with a gentleman who used to be the head of the Ocean Shores Chamber, thank you. I lost the word. And unfortunately, he's for it. So, and we don't know about Westport, but we're suspicious that they would be for it. Again, the mantra is, as always, jobs, jobs, jobs. And that's why many of these type of proposals come to economically depressed individuals, because they know, or companies, because they know that they can slide many things through. Fortunately, we have people like you and people like us who are going to try and educate that there's something more important, or equally important, I should say. Yes?
Have you investigated doing a county or community rights ordinance?
We've looked at it, but we have not been able to organize it as of yet.
Because the regulations, the whole system, you're never gonna win. They'll come in and they'll say, well, we'll make the trains this long. They'll just keep working it because they want in, instead of saying, no. Here's our, you say you had a county commissioner here from your group? Yeah. Then you go get the Community Rights Defense League on this, because this is winning all over the world, the community rights ordinance.
Right. That's a good thought.
I want rights organizations are winning in Pennsylvania because of the way the Pennsylvania Constitution is written. The Constitution in Washington is, the state constitution is written very differently. That's the first thing. The second thing is the difference also is in Pennsylvania, they were fighting the mines, which are very local. It's a local industry, okay? What they were trying to fight in Bellingham was the trains, which is protected by the Interstate Commerce Act, which is enshrined in the federal constitution. In the Commerce Clause. See, and you're gonna run into the same thing here, because you're running into trains first, and then the ships. You're gonna, I understand completely what you're saying. I think it's a really good idea for a really long-term thing, but if you wanna stop these particular proposals in this next year or two, that's gonna siphon a lot of your energy away from things that have a better possibility of working.
So, if we can summarize, we want to know what the cumulative effects of all of these things might be, from all the way from taking it out of the ground and the fracking that is required to do that, the train trips that brings it into our state, all of the communities that are affected by that, what happens when it gets to Hoquiam, what happens when it gets out of Hoquiam, what will happen when they change the law and no longer prohibit crude oil to be exported. And so, as a result, we think, and we are suing for, an environmental impact statement to analyze the impacts. And to quote Chief Sealth, we do not inherit the earth from our parents. We borrow it from our children. Thank you. So those two people that are up there are the co-leads for the project. Those are their addresses. There is a comment period still on the Imperium MDNS
How much longer is it?
till June 3rd.
Actually, I don't think you're going broad enough. I think what you're asking for is really good, but you should be doing the impact all the way back to the drilling and the fracking.
Yes.
They're making an absolute mess out of North Dakota. It's what we've been demanding in Bellingham on the coal terminal, is the impact of the mines also. It also gets you a lot of allies. The tribes there have been very organized.
And that is something that we would argue for, that we need to do that.
Good.
And have you talked to the Army Corps of Engineers about trying to get that programmatic?
The one issue that we have is that at the present, the Imperium and the Westways do not require an Army 404. Because they're not, pardon me?
But it's shoreline, wouldn't that involve people?
Only if they fill wetlands or work in the waters of the state with the Corps V. Now, once U.S. development gets started, then we would have an access to that.
Okay, Arnold, Arthur, thank you very much. Thank you for dropping here from Grace Harbor. And we have another very short presentation, 10 or 15 minutes. I'd like to introduce Jared Biglar Barnes, who is a high school student and has done original research on environmentally sensitive streams and rivers in the Elma and Grace Harbor areas. Jared, thanks for being here.
So I'm going to do kind of a local approach, looking inland at the rail route and the possible effects of the spill on some of our inland streams and estuary areas and wetlands. So with that, let's begin. So overview, we're going to talk about what are the chances of spill occurring along the route. Is this working? It's good, there we are. How can you contain a spill in a stream or river? What about a wetland, or how about a flood event?
Oh, flood, yeah.
Which I think most of you know the Chehalis River is very notorious for its flooding. So we already heard some of this, but this is how many trains a day that will be going on the route. One full train from Imperium, 2 from US Development, and then 2 from Westway every other day, although this is probably subject to change through the proposals. So about 12.5 trains a week, 50 full trains every month, and 650 full trains every year going in and out of the harbor.
Just the coal train, there are other trains, it's just the oil train. There are other trains on that steam line.
Yeah, this doesn't, and I should mention that's 650 full trains going in and then another 650 going out.
Yeah.
So,
Oil or coal?
this is oil, yes. I took a look at the determination of non-significance for the Westway, and I think they also included Imperium's statistics for this. Just those 2 projects alone would increase the rail traffic along the line 133%. Then we'll go into the creeks and rivers that oil trains will pass over heading to Port of Grace Harbor. So this is a map here. Switch over to my little handy dandy laser pointer here. So you have the proposals down here in the Port of Grace Harbor, and in the red is the Puget Sound Pacific Railroad, and all of the yellow highlighted streams are streams that the railroad passes directly over.
How many are there?
There is a total of 100 streams and rivers from Centralia to the Port of Grace Harbor. So you can see starting over there in Centralia, some of the larger ones at Skookumchuck River, the Black River, Qualam Creek, Sansa River, Wanouchi River, Wishkah, Hoquim River, all of which are salmon-bearing salmon streams. And all the smaller streams most likely are salmon-bearing as well. And then there's another 72 unnamed streams that I don't have listed here. These are just the named larger main streams. So something that could happen if you had oil spill. So then we're going to go on to wetlands. There are at least 23 definable wetlands along the Puget Sound Pacific rail line. I consider the surge plain, the Chehalis River surge plain, as one because for 7 miles the Puget Sound Pacific Railroad goes along it. It would be very difficult for a oil spill to be cleaned up in any of these wetlands or to be cleaned up in the surge plain, since it's tidally influenced and you'd have oil getting fluxed in and out of all the wetland systems. So here's another view from Google Earth. Every one of those is a wetland. Again, there's a 23. You can see Centralia, Rochester, Helena. And wetlands provide critical rearing habitat for coho and many other salmon species, as well as cutthroat and steelhead. Yeah.
So, I'm getting a little confused, which I should know the difference, but I don't. How do the wetlands and the rivers line up? So is a wetland something separate from the rivers? Since you're talking about 23 wetlands and 100?
Most of these wetlands are associated with that 100 streams and rivers. Many of them are drain or creeks go through these wetlands. These here are all basically right next to the tracks. If a train derailed and spilled, the oil, if it were to spill, would go right into these wetlands. I mean, I'll tell you right now, there's a lot more wetlands than that in the Chehalis Valley, but these are just the wetlands that are right next to the tracks and would be affected directly by a spill. And many of these, as I said, many of those 100 streams and rivers either drain into and then back out of, or drain out of these wetlands. So any spill in these wetlands, especially during like a high water event, would go into the streams, go into the Chehalis, and go out into the estuary in that order.
Oh, where's the Black River on that?
Actually, I kind of hid it under the Rochester sign there, but the Black River is right here. It goes through up to Black Lake near Olympia here.
Oh, I see.
So, yeah.
But it crosses, I mean, it comes from the Chehalis or?
Yeah, the flows out this way, goes through here, and then goes into Chehalis, which then goes up.
Oh, okay.
Have to keep switching between Pointer and here. Alright, so this is more defined of the Chehalis Basin surge plain. It is tidally influenced, so any spill that occurred along the PSAP here would spread out through the wetland complex. This, I do know, is critical for the Chehalis River coho and steelhead runs for rearing habitat for outgoing salmon. So anything in here that would occur would adversely affect the fisheries of the Chehalis. I bet a lot of us here like fishing here, eating fish, so it wouldn't be good.
Is that the river?
Yeah, the main river goes right through the center there, and then those are all the sloughs and small estuary marine areas. And then also, I'm not sure if you guys have been there, but one of the popular places to go is Preacher's Slough, which is right here. There's an interpretive trail along there. It's quite a wonderful place to go. Really good outdoor recreational activities, and it gives you a really good example. This is one I want to say Preacher's Slough, although it could be the main stem of the Chehalis. I'm not sure on that, but it is in the surge plain. And then this is Preacher's Slough during medium tide, and then during when it's low tide. And again, during high tide, there's so many channels throughout this area. If there was an oil spill, it would be nigh impossible to clean up. Yeah. So anybody tells you different is lying. All right. So finally, the last point I'd like to make is in a disaster situation. This is actually an old railroad bridge that went across the Chehalis, washed out one of our flood events. It was then replaced and then abandoned in the 1990s. It was the old Union Pacific line. However, this is very characteristic of many of our railroad bridges that go over those 100 streams and rivers that I mentioned earlier. They're deteriorating, they need to be either replaced or repaired, and from what we've heard so far, there's not a lot of funds that are going to be going towards that for these projects.
And the public would be paid for those.
Some of it would be the public, like
95%.
crossings and stuff like that, and the bridges would probably be grants they'd apply for, stuff like that.
Yeah, but
It would still be public, so it's, I think some of it would be paid for by the railroad, I'm not sure how much.
My understanding from the stuff that happened up in Bellingham is that it's a 95% public funded, 5%.
That's what I thought.
But that's because that's the main line.
Yeah.
That's a passenger line.
And again, the Puget Sound,
It's the same.
the Puget Sound Pacific Railroad, it has a lot of rail traffic already, but not a lot of that is as heavy as the one rail train or oil train car. The bridges just weren't built to handle that heavy of loads, so it just increases the chance of any spill along our creeks and rivers. Those bridges can handle the commodities we have right now because they're not that heavy. They're not as heavy. So that's one of the issues there. So, and then this is the severe disaster situation here. But in 2007, I'm sure you're all aware of the flood event that we had. It was massive. It was historic, and it could easily happen again in any part of the valley. So if a train derailed into the floodwaters, I would find it very highly unlikely that it could ever be contained. It would be spreading throughout the valley. I mean, when the floodwaters are out, winds could just carry it across the valley very easily. And then recovery. Would we be seeing oil being cleaned out of people's home along with silt and mud? And that's something I don't think any of us want to see. And then impacts to livestock, foraging in fields that are contaminated with an oil spill. So this is from the 2007 flood event. This is right outside of Elma, actually. This is Wakefield Road, and that was historic flooding. And I think it had only happened once before that water had gone over there. No, this is not 101. This is Wakefield.
It's a county road.
It's a county road, but this road here, on the left-hand side, there is a drop off of about 10, maybe 11, 12 feet. So the water is that high up going over here. This is from the 2007 storm as well. This is, you can kind of see over here on the right-hand side, that's the beginning of the Wainuchi River Railroad Bridge. This was a derailment that occurred because water basically accumulated in between the tracks. It wasn't from flooding over top of it, it was just water in the tracks. So this occurred, and I can't remember, but I think these were empty. They might have been full, I'm not positive on that, so I don't want to speculate. But oil trains are pound 100 times heavier. So if that happens with just a small accumulation in between the tracks, what can happen? And you should also realize that this happened when there was floodwaters in this field. So an oil train derails into the floodwaters carry the oil out. It's not a good situation. And then this is another picture. Actually, you have a railroad going right through the middle here. I think that's the Port of Tacoma down by Centralia Chehalis. And again, this just shows you the extent of the flooding. An oil spill would disperse out over all that area, and it'd be impossible to clean up. So the farmers wouldn't just be dealing with cleaning up after a whole bunch of silt, but they'd have to be trying to figure out how to decontaminate their fields. And for local farmers, that's not a prospect that they could deal with. It would be bankruptcy, maybe. It would be horrible. So again, showing you the silt from the 2007, and just imagine oil interlaced with that. And just show you just a picture from the BP spill, what oil looks like in the water. It's not a pretty picture. I mean, cleanup is, and I mean, this is coastal grasslands. I mean, think of that in the Preacher Slough area, how you could clean that up. I don't think that's possible. And it would be incredibly detrimental to our fisheries and ecosystems. Exxon Valdez, all the area you see in black is oil. So, I mean, that's characteristic of some of the coastline from the North Coast. So is that what we want to see if there was an oil spill from a ship? Or how about the harbor? So, that's all I have. Just some questions and things to think about. Thank you. Any questions?
So I've heard that coal trains are really heavy, and you're saying oil trains are heavy. Do you have any comparison between?
I think
Comparison between maybe
Arnie would, yeah.
They're quite similar. The coal train, these oil trains are loaded about 175,000 pounds of crude oil.
And the coal trains are loaded very similar, so they're both quite heavy. And that's why they have to take them up down the gorge rather than over any of the passes.
Can you give an estimate
They give an estimate what?
of how heavy they are?
The coal trains are probably 175,000, 180,000 pounds. These are 208,000 pounds, so it's not much different.
And compare it to, say, a grain train or a logging train that you usually get.
No, those are tons, not pounds, right?
So,
No, they're thousands of pounds. 208, were it 208 tons?
yeah.
No, they're not. They're 208,000 pounds.
108 tons for an oil tanker and 117 tons for each coal car, of which they lose about 500 pounds.
Yeah, so,
He was giving it in pounds.
Right.
okay. Anyways, they're both heavy. They both have to take the same route. And if you live in Spokane, you're going to see a lot of trains.
By the way, there was a study that the city of Spokane did about the death rates. And the people who lived in the northern part of the city along the railroad tracks had an average lifespan 10 years shorter than the people who lived in the southern part of the city and away from the railroad tracks.
Any other questions?
If you Google that, you'll find it almost instantly.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
in western Washington.